Welcome to the Survivor to Thriver show with your happiness expert, Samia Bano. Are you a survivor of abuse or other trauma? Are you tired of feeling stuck, silent, and stressed all the time? This is the podcast people from all over the world join in to learn exactly how to stop suffering and start living with more inner peace and joy. Are you ready to eliminate suffering from your life and transform from a survivor to thriver? Then congratulations, you are in the right place. Let's get started. Hey, welcome back to the Survivor to Thriver show. We have been reflecting on the teaching that love is born of compassion. Last episode, I shared with you a specific technique that we can all use to build up our compassion muscle. Today, I want to take some time and reflect on this teaching of love being born of compassion in the context of my own life journey and my own story of healing and transformation from survivor to thriver. And of course, since this is an area of expertise for the heart, I shared with you love as a subject as an area of expertise for our heart. So I connected with my heart for it to share with me what wisdom it has on this teaching and frame it in the context of my own personal life experience. And when I asked my heart to show me an example of a relationship where love is born of compassion, my heart showed me my brother. My brother is one of the people that I love the most in my life, and I love him and accept him just as he is, and I know that he loves and accepts me into his life and his heart just as I am. But it wasn't always the case. This wasn't always the case. As I thought back to my relationship, to how my relationship used to be with my brother, I saw this desert. It was like our relationship had become like a desert where very little happened, where even the interactions we had were fairly meaningless. I might as well have been having those interactions with a stranger I didn't care about. And the big problem was that we really didn't understand each other. And we couldn't understand or relate to what the other was experiencing and going through. I know at my end, I was just too consumed by my own grief. And he was just one more person that I had shut out of my life and my heart in my efforts to protect myself and keep myself safe from being hurt again in the aftermath of surviving child sexual abuse. And this state of affairs went on for several years, actually, and may very well have continued to remain like that. But something happened, and a circumstance in our life and in our world created a major shift in our life. At this point in time, I was around actually 14 years old. If you remember, this was right around the time that my family moved from the Middle East to Pakistan. And actually, this incident that I'm going to share with you right now was the cause of that move. My brother had an accident, and there were some complications in his treatment, because of which he ended up in a wheelchair. My brother actually has a neuromuscular degenerative disorder, which means that his muscles are becoming weaker and weaker over time. So we all knew that sooner or later he would end up in a wheelchair, very likely end up in a wheelchair anyway. But none of us could have anticipated that it would happen quite so soon and in quite this fashion. He was not even 18 at that time when this accident happened. And when where we were living in the Middle East, that was the United Arab Emirates, at that time they didn't have very immigrant-friendly laws in the country. One of their laws was that no male would be given a visa unless they were a student or working. And in the aftermath of my brother's accident, we weren't sure when he would be able to go back to school, let alone engage in any kind of job or work. So we were literally forced out of the country. Except it wasn't quite so simple, because with my family background, my dad being from India, my mother being from Pakistan, it was not going to be a simple decision for us as to where we could go together to be as a family. So it was in that condition that my parents made the best decision that they could, and they decided that my mother would take my brother and my sister and I to stay with her family in Pakistan for some time while my dad figured out how we could get a visa for my brother, and so that our family could basically remain together. But until my dad was going to be able to figure that out, we unfortunately couldn't remain together in the United Arab Emirates. So my mother ended up taking us to Pakistan. And, this was a very novel condition for our family in terms of having to learn and figure out and understand how to take care of our brother and how we could best support him now that he had suddenly ended up in a situation where he was unable to stand, unable to walk, and having to depend on basic needs like going to the bathroom on other people. And you can imagine if you had to take care of somebody in your life, maybe it's a family member who got sick or has some kind of disability, or if you're a parent and think back to when you had to take care of your little baby, when your child was still a little baby and dependent on you for taking care of them, taking care of their every little big need. You know that it can be quite a challenging circumstance to get for, and it's something that takes getting used to, right? It takes adjustment, and that takes time, and it takes patience. And although my mother was the primary person who took on the role of caretaker for my brother, we belong to a culture as Indians and Pakistanis where even our identities, you see, they are formed and understood in the context of our relationships. And the relationships and the welfare and the well-being of the group, of the family, is given priority even over individual freedom and individual development. And when somebody in your family is in trouble, it's all hands on deck to helping that family member in trouble. And what this meant for me was that I was also called upon to help in this situation, take care of my brother. And really, this call for me to step up and do what I could to contribute to taking care of my brother was, for me, a really lucky break. One of the unseen blessings of a seemingly very negative event, right? And I say that now in retrospect, I can see the blessing in it, because when this shift in our circumstances occurred, it allowed for a shift in my own behavior. And that shift had to do with me being forced to, not forced in a negative sense, but in a positive sense, being forced to stop just thinking about me, just caring about me, and instead shift my focus onto thinking about someone else, taking care of someone else, right? And this shift in focus wasn't a conscious, thoughtful decision on my part at that time. I was just responding to the circumstances. And my response was governed mostly by how I'd been raised and the values that had been given to me and what was expected of me and what I had even learned to expect of myself in terms of how I must act in a situation like this, given the values that I had been raised with. Now, I do get some credit in this situation in that I didn't resist the role that was given to me. I didn't resist implementing the teachings that I had been brought up with in terms of stepping up to help my brother in this situation. And as I stepped up to help my brother, I did it with a good spirit. I didn't complain. I didn't create drama about it. And this was a reflection of the fact that I have a naturally good and compassionate nature. And really, we all do. We all have great compassion in our hearts. We just need to learn to connect with it. And sometimes even when we may not make the decision to connect with our compassionate selves in a very conscious way, sometimes circumstances will call forth that compassion. And as in this particular case, without thinking too much, I actually ended up just acting instinctively with compassion. So even as I was struggling with my own sense of pain and suffering, this gave me something else to focus on. Now, I'm not saying that I entirely forgot my own pain and suffering or stopped my brooding, on my own difficulties and challenges 100%. No, not at all. But for at least a part of every day now, I was focused on something else, on someone else other than me and my pain and my suffering, which was really helpful, right? And in fact, this is part of the reality of how the healing process works. We will either make a conscious decision to distract ourselves from our own pain and suffering, because we cannot sustain that state where we are continually focused on our own pain and suffering for long. It's just too painful a place to be in. So either we will distract ourselves from it with a conscious decision and effort, or circumstances may do that for us. But even with these times of distraction, there will be other times when we go back to thinking about our own pain and suffering, right? The downtime. And that's okay. That's okay. That's just a part of the reality of how the healing process works. Now, as time goes on, especially if we can become aware of what we are doing that's helping and what's hurting, then we can begin to really take control of our well-being at a conscious level. And once we learn to gain control of our well-being, we can speed up the healing process. Versus if we were to just leave things to chance or just allow nature to take its course. And the other really great lesson that I learned through this experience was, I will admit that this is the lesson that I've learned in retrospect. I didn't necessarily perceive this in the moment at that time. But this idea that there are always hidden blessings. There are always hidden blessings, and even the worst kind of circumstances that we can imagine, there are hidden blessings. Even when we are not aware of what they are nonetheless there, and they're in force, and they're helping to make our lives better. And if we can become consciously aware of what those blessings are and how they're helping us, then our sense of gratitude and pleasure and peace, even as that situation is ongoing, becomes so much more enhanced. So think about that. I'm going to go ahead and wrap up right here for today. And until we connect tomorrow, next episode, I just want to remind you, please show me some love by going onto iTunes and leaving this show a 5-star rating. All right. So, and in the meanwhile, I wish you lots of peace and joy.